Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. And I want to start with a question. When you make a mistake, how do you actually talk to yourself? Are you kind, the way you would be if it were someone that you loved made a mistake? Or are you kind of caustic, kind of rough? Think about it. Do you feel worthy and valuable, right? Worthy of love, simply by virtue of you being here, being alive. How valuable do you think you are? And how connected for you is your value to your productivity? So as you contemplate those questions, I'm going to tell you what this episode is all about, because I do believe it is for you. I'm going to be breaking down what self-love actually is, because I feel like there's a lot of myths out there, and I'll be listing some indications of a deficit of self-love, like a little checklist for you, and giving you some ideas of how you can create more rock-solid self-love in your life, because you deserve it, my friend. But before we get going, if you are new to this channel, please introduce yourself in the comments, because we are a friendly group of people. And make sure you hit the bell icon and subscribe so you get notified when I roll out new episodes, which is every Tuesday and every Thursday. And I wouldn't want you to miss a thing, so make sure you hit the bell. If you don't know me, my name is Terri Cole. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert, and the author of Boundary Boss, which you can get at boundarybossbook.com. I also want to say thank you so much for all of your questions and your comments. You guys know that I read every one and I love to highlight them. So today I'm highlighting a comment from Erin Elizabeth under the episode, How to Create Emotionally Trustworthy Relationships. Terri, you are such a gift from the universe. You always seem to serendipitously speak directly to what I'm going through, like you're some kind of personal guardian angel. I've been going through this odd experience since reconnecting with an old friend who I've always thought of as a best friend. I've been feeling hesitant to spend time with her and wanting to distance due to certain things that have happened, but I haven't been able to put it all together into one thing that makes cohesive sense. Emotionally untrustworthy. That's it. Your illumination helps me feel more clear about what I've been feeling in that relationship and why, and makes me feel more confident that I'm not crazy. There is something strange afoot. Thank you, my internet mama. You clear my eyes again. Well, thank you, Erin Elizabeth, for being a part of this crew. I super duper appreciate you. Now, let's move into today's content. What are some signs of a lack of self-love? Why don't we start there? That can be the easiest way for us to back into how to build more self-love. So, signs of lack of self-love. One is excessive negative self-talk, where if you have that inner mean committee that's going off all the time, if you make a mistake, this is something that you have to really be aware of. So I want you to get honest right now. And in the guide that goes along with this episode, I'm going to be guiding you through this. I'll give you the list so that you have it, and I'm going to give you some questions as well. So it's terricole.com/guide. What is negative self-talk? Like, what actually is it? It's saying mean things to yourself. It's exactly what it sounds like. And you know what I'm talking about, because if I say to my therapy clients, if they're telling me what their negative self-talk is and how they talk to themselves, and I always ask, would you say that to your child? Would you say that to your best friend? And of course, they're like, oh my gosh, I would never say that. You're like, correct. So therefore, please don't say it to you. The second thing to look out for is having the disease to please, right? The people-pleasing syndrome. Looking for too much external validation is a sign of a deficit of self-love, right? Because if we're looking outside of ourselves for that, it means that there's something missing inside of ourselves. All of us like positive feedback from others. I mean, most people, that's very human and very normal. But you know what I'm talking about. If you're a people pleaser, it's the extreme of that. We're not simply talking about liking positive feedback. We're talking about working really hard for positive feedback and being undiscerning about who we get it from. It's like wanting positive feedback from everyone, you know what I mean? Which is different than wanting positive feedback from our VIPs or the important people in our lives, or you want your boss to think you did a good job. That's very human and very normal. But when you have the disease to please, when you really have the people-pleasing syndrome, there is so much suffering and so much exhaustion and so much bandwidth that goes to that. And it definitely is an indication of scarcity of self-love, because we're looking out for what we need to be looking in 4, the next thing to think about, indication of lack of self-love, is having crappy boundaries, right? Which that can include overgiving, overfunctioning, feeling overly responsible for the feeling states and the situations of others, which of course is also describing codependency, being last on your own list, prioritizing everyone above yourself. Having disordered boundaries in that way is also exhausting and not great for you, and is an indication of a deficit of self-love. When we're last on our own list, eventually what happens? You become angry, you become bitter. There's no way to do that for like a lifetime and not end up, what do I say? It's a one-way ticket to Bitterland, because it is. That's a fact. There's nowhere else to go. Because again, we're putting the people in our lives in an impossible situation when we're looking for self-love from other people, right? They're two different things, right? And no one else can ever fill the hole that only self-love can fill. I'm going to get to that when I'm done with this. And another indication of lack of self-love and self-esteem is minimizing your own achievements, right? Putting yourself down to not threaten others, not being able to take a compliment when someone says you did a great job and you're like, oh yeah, but then I made that mistake in the end. There's this tendency to just not want to threaten other people. And that's really what we're talking about, is that many of us have been taught that if we feel too good about ourselves, that's not good. If we feel too good about ourselves, then we are full of ourselves. And that's not good. You have a big head. All of these things that can be normalized in childhood, right? Could be modeled behavior as well. Maybe one of your parents was like that and put themselves down all the time. And you saw that as modeled behavior where you're like, oh, this is what it means to be a good person. This is what it looks like. But it also really is a lack of self-love, because there's nothing wrong with feeling good about the hard work that you do and the things that you've achieved. It's really not real to continually minimize your own achievements, because your achievements stand for themselves, the things that you've done, the things that you're good at. And here's the thing, if we need to put ourselves down to not threaten others, we're probably hanging out with the wrong people, or we think people will be threatened and really maybe they'll be really happy for us. Like, you don't even know, So let's talk about what builds real self-love. First of all, I have lots of things I say about self-love, right? Self-love is the only path to any other kind of healthy, real love. That I believe in my heart of hearts. But almost more importantly for this episode is that your self-love, how you treat yourself, how you regard yourself, this sets the bar for every other relationship in your life, which is why self-love is so important. And treating yourself with respect is so important, because what we're really doing is we are modeling behavior for the other people in our lives by the way we relate to ourselves. When you have rock solid boundaries, when you know yourself, and I'm going to be moving into this now, when you have self-respect, where you know your deal breakers, other people respect that. And when we're looking for them to tell us what they should be or to give us permission to have them, our preferences, our limits, and our deal breakers, which of course are our boundaries, then we're setting ourselves and our relationships up to fail. That is a fact. Self-knowledge is one of the first and most important ways of building real self-love, because people who take the time to really deeply know themselves tend to curate and accumulate more self-love, because you're not just flailing around. For example, if you know your preferences, then you can act on that knowledge, right? Rather than what other people think your preferences should be, or rather than, if you're people pleasing, looking to see what their preferences are so that you kind of match up with them. When you know your preferences and you can speak them, right? That is you talking true, as I would say, making decisions aligned with your actual truth is only a possibility when you take the time and the energy to deeply understand yourself. Like, why am I the way I am? Even just simple questions, which I'll put this in the guide for you guys, but even right now, just bring it to your mind. What do I really want in life? Think about whatever comes to you. How do I want to feel on a daily basis? How do I want to be treated? So I'll include those questions, terricole.com/guide. But those are things you have to know about yourself if you're going to create them in your relationships and in the world. Because the truth is, honoring what you truly want and how you authentically feel, that is just a radical act of self-love. And here's the thing, only you can do that because you're the only one who knows that. All right, the second idea for building self-love is flexing your self-compassion muscle, being kind to yourself, right? Like I said at the top of the episode, talking about how do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? Like, we need to get that inner mean committee under control, right? Give yourself a break. It's like we sometimes forget to give ourselves time and space when we need it. It's like go, 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 do, work yourself into the ground, all about achievement, hustle culture, all of this crap that is so incredibly unhealthy. And yes, there's nothing wrong with working. We all work. I mean, most of us work. But it's the same thing if you look at it, if you flip it and say, if this were my grown child who I adore, acting this way, living this way, not taking care of themselves, working themselves to death, would I think it was a great thing? Would I think that it was amazing? No. You would be like, hello, what is wrong with you? Take care of yourself. So I want you to apply that. And here's the thing, having high standards, that's not the same as overworking, overgiving, overdoing. There's got to be, self-compassion means you actually care about how you feel, which means dialing into what you need when you need it. And yes, I've spent years of my life just muscling through, just plowing through, just getting it done, saying things like, I just need to get through the holidays. I just need to get through this launch. I just need to get through this, whatever the thing is. That is not self-loving to spend our lives in a future that never comes. Because if we're like, it's going to calm down and I'm going to treat myself better when I'm done with this. So really, self-compassion means giving yourself permission to take the time to self-nurture, to fill up your own bucket, and really treat yourself the way you would treat the people that you deeply, deeply care about. Because what I find in my therapy practice and in my courses is that we don't. We usually have a higher standard of treatment for others. And it's almost like this false idea of strength. Like, well, I can take it, I can do it. Just because you can do it doesn't necessarily mean you should do it or that it is self-loving to do it. So that is an important distinction for you to make in your life. Just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you should or that it's in your highest good, right? We need self-care, self-kindness, self-compassion. The third thing I want to talk about that creates more self-love is practicing self-forgiveness. Again, there's such a double standard most of the time where we can be forgiving of other people, but we just want to remind ourselves of the mistakes that we've made, right? Constantly reminding or reliving the mistakes that you've made in your life. It's not only unhelpful, right? It's downright mean. Imagine if someone else were doing that to you, and maybe they are, and if they are, get out of that relationship, please. Really, our job in life is to learn from our experiences. And we can categorize them as mistakes or not, but your job is to find the gems in the crap stew, right? The crap stew of any situation that was terrible. Trust me when I tell you, if you're willing to get your hands dirty and roll up your sleeves, there is a gem of wisdom in there for you. But we got to be willing to do the work to find them. Second to last thought I have for you is I want you to identify and challenge the limiting beliefs that you have about yourself. It is very self-loving to do this. Sometimes I call this crushing your racket. So what is your racket? All of us have some kind of a theme. We might have more than one, but it's like the limiting story or self-sabotaging BS that you tell yourself, right? When you talk about yourself to others, do you reinforce these things? And it could be something that happened in childhood. My original racket was that I was born the wrong gender. I believed that growing up that my father wanted a boy because I was his fourth daughter. First of all, according to my mother, it wasn't even true. But I spent years trying to prove something because of that limiting racket, right? There's nothing wrong with the gender that I was assigned at birth for me. It wouldn't have been better if I had been a boy, even though in my fantasy, that would have explained why my father was so absent and not there emotionally and all of those things. So, I mean, listen, that limiting racket also had a dual purpose for my young mind, but it also made me feel bad about myself. So think about like the ways that you fight for your limitations. Do you say, oh my God, I'm terrible in math, or I have no direction sense, I'm awful at that, or I have different friends that constantly put themselves down. And it's all of these rackets about the way their body looks, about their choice in partners, about whatever it is. So I want you to think about, what is your racket? What is sort of the main limiting beliefs? And I'll give you a couple of questions so that you can figure it out in the guide, terricole.com/guide. And the last thing I want to talk about, which I talk about all the time, but is getting your boundary house in order. Because when you have disordered boundaries, you can't really actively prioritize yourself, because either you have disordered boundaries one way or the other. If they're too rigid, then you're constantly, pushing people away and doing things on your own and overworking and all of that, cutting people off rather than having a conversation, being really forceful about what you want, not trusting other people. That's having too rigid boundaries. Or your boundaries may be too porous, where you're more of a peacekeeper or a pushover or a chameleon. And that really puts you last on your own list, because you are seeking to avoid conflict at all costs, even if it means self-abandonment. So working on your boundaries, which of course is so much of the work that I put out there in the world for you, and I wrote a whole book for you, is something that is a really important stepping stone to creating rock solid self-love. So I would love to know what your thoughts are about this. I hope that this episode added value to your one and only amazing life. If it did, please share it with the people in your life. But I would love to hear from you. How is your self-love? Did this resonate with you? Did you find anything helpful about it? You know where to find me on Instagram, on Facebook, all the places. I hope you guys have an amazing week. And as always, take care of you.